Hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today I want to show you something that I've been working on for about a week, and it is a Spore Saryn setup for farming Sanctuary Onslaught. The reason it took me so long is because I was trying to figure out what the cheapest version of this build that would still farm Elite Sanctuary Onslaught would be, so I can show you that as well as the finished version that you can slowly upgrade into. And here is what I came up with. Now I am using Saryn Prime. You don't have to use Saryn Prime, it will work on the standard Saryn as well, it's just that I don't have the standard Saryn anymore. And we started off with probably the most expensive part of this setup, which is the Corrosive Projection Aura. This is one of the strongest auras in the game because of how armor works and how much armor the endgame enemies can have, so you should definitely try to get your hands on this no matter what. I'm also not using an Exilus mod because I wanted the budget to be as low as possible, which is also the reason why I'm not using any arcanes here. Then I'm using Handspring for the 160% faster knockdown recovery. This is super nice and will save your ass multiple times in Onslaught because especially if you're running solo, if you get knocked down, you're dead. Now you might be thinking, is this really necessary? Because I'm pretty sure you can just avoid the knockdowns, and the answer is yes it is, because you can't. If you're fighting the Grenier and they have scorpions or infested with ancients, those will happily snipe you mid-air with their get over here hooks. Next up, I have Flow, which may seem tad unnecessary for a setup that can actually gain energy by popping spores with Toxic Lash, but the reason I added it here is because it gives me more of a buffer for bad RNG, because every now and then the game will just dick you with Eximus spawns and it will spawn nothing but energy leeches. Now this is not a big deal if you're running the Xenodic Focus School and you have energy dash, but I didn't want to make this focus dependent, so that's why it's there. Next up, I'm using Stretch, which gives me some power range, and this basically makes it so that whenever we pop a spore, they will spread much farther apart, making covering the entire map in spores much easier. After that, I'm using the standard version of Continuity for some duration, which will make both our spores and Toxic Lash last longer so we don't have to cast them as often, and Intensify for some power strength, which increases the damage of our spores but also the amount of damage we get from Toxic Lash. And we top it all off with a bunch of defense in the form of Vitality, Steel Fiber, and Redirection. Now if you feel comfortable using less defense, that's completely fine, you can just remove one of these, but I would highly recommend you run all three of them because the amount of damage you can take in Elite Sanctuary Onslaught is just absurd. Now the weapon I'm using with this setup is a Zero Forma Castle War with a potato. But you don't have to use the Castle War, just pick whatever melee weapon you have that has the most range. And the setup is, well, whatever stance matches the polarity, you're not actually gonna use the combo, so it's just there for the capacity, pressure point for damage, fury for attack speed, reach for some range, fever strike for extra toxin damage, and then I'm using Smite Grenier, which is a very cheap way of adding a bunch of extra damage where you need it the most, the Grenier. Now all 5 of these mods are super common and you should have them by the time you get to Sanctuary Onslaught. The other 3 are a little bit more tricky. Healing Return is a pretty big deal because it will heal you every time you hit an enemy that has a status proc on them, and while this is a rare mod, it drops from Infested Crawler, so you can farm it en masse, and even if you don't want to farm it, you can buy it for like 6 to 10 platinum at least on PC. Virulent Scourge, which is the Toxin dual stat mod, drops from Corrupted Vor in the Void in the final branch of the Void, the highest level one. Simply stay in the mission and he will eventually spawn. And the final mod is Vicious Frost, the cold-based dual stat mod, which will combine with Virulent Scourge and give us viral damage. And this is a reward from T1 spy mission, so simply do low-level spy missions, do all 3 of the vaults, and you will eventually get it. Now I've tried running many different variations of single elements and combos, so I did run Solo Toxin, I tried Corrosive, I tried Radiation, and Viral just felt the best. Now the gameplay here is pretty straightforward. Activate Toxic Lash, throw a spore on an enemy, and then just slide through as many of them as possible. And that's pretty much it. Toxic Lash makes it so that whenever you hit an enemy, you will pop at least one spore and restore some energy, and it adds solo toxin damage that is separate to the viral damage, so the spores do even more damage. It also heals you for each enemy hit thanks to Healing Return, because all the enemies are covered in viral and toxin procs. Now the reason I'm using slide attacks isn't because I miss memeing Strike, because let's be honest, nobody does, but it's just how you hit the most amount of enemies while also avoiding a lot of the damage because, well, you're sliding forward, you're constantly moving. Now I'm gonna be honest here, I have never managed to push this budget version of this setup past Zone 8. I just can't do it, but I'm also not very good with this setup, so I thoroughly believe that with a bit of practice you can actually get through it. Because it's not really an issue of keeping up efficiency, it's more that I just can't avoid the damage. And now let's talk about sort of the final version of this build, the version that you can upgrade the budget version into over time as you get more mods. We are once again using the Corrosive Projection Aura, but we're now using the Aviator mod in the Exilus mod. This is just such a strong mod, especially for Elite Onslaught, because what you can do is just jump into the air and ta-ta, you now have 40% damage reduction. I am still using Handspring for the faster knockdown recovery, it's just way too good. I have Intensify and Transient Fortitude for way more power strength. This makes our Spore do a little bit more damage, well actually a lot more damage, but it also makes it so that our Toxic Lash adds more damage on top of that. Now we can afford to run this because we're now running the primed version of Continuity, which adds a ton more duration. I'm still only using Stretch because it was enough for me personally, but I changed Redirection for Primed Vigor because it adds some health, which is way better for effective health thanks to all the armor we get from Steel Fiber. And the two arcanes I like the most were Arcane Strike, which gives you melee attack speed when you hit an enemy, and Arcane Guardian, which gives you a ton of flat armor when you get damaged. Now an even bigger upgrade is gonna come with your melee weapon, where basically sky is the limit. You want to use once again a stance that matches the polarity for the capacity, but I'm using Primed Pressure Point, Primed Fury, Primed Reach, Condition Overload. I still have Healing Return for the healing, Maiming Strike for crits, and then the 2 dual stat mods for viral damage. Now one thing I really have to stress here is that the Guandao is a terrible weapon for a setup like this because it doesn't have the status, but it's one of the few melee weapons that actually has enough forma for me to support this build. You ideally want to put this on a Zol, which is what I'm working on right now. And I'm personally going for a polearm Zol because I really like polearms. That's going to be kind of similar to my Poor Man's Orthos Prime, which is a Zol that I made a video about a few months ago. Now this version of the setup farms Elite Onslaught really hard. It is hands down the strongest setup I've used in Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, and it very reliably gets past Zone 8. It does slow down a little bit in this week's Zone 8 because it's against the full Grenier roster in a not so good tile set, so you will bleed a little bit of efficiency, but even though I'm not the best player in the world, especially with a setup like this, I've yet to fail this. I always manage to get past Zone 8, which unless you're going for a high score is as high as you ever need to go, because that's where you get the Rotation C reward, so you already got a shot at the full drop table. And that's pretty much it, so I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and it was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.